On the agenda is the welcoming statement by my humble self as the chairperson of the PAGE Task Force. Your Excellency the President, Sheikh Professor Alhaji Dr. Yahya A.J.J. Jammeh, Your Excellency the Vice President and Minister of Women's Affairs, Dr. Ajaratu Aisatunjai Seidi, Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Your Lord Chief Justice, the Honorable Secretary General and Head of the Civil Service, Honorable Cabinet Ministers, representative of the UN Under Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa in the name of Professor Nadosi, the UNDP resident representative and head of the UN country team, Governor of the Central Bank of the Gambia, Ambassador Dembo Baji and team of investors from India, members of the diplomatic and consular corps, permanent secretaries, service chiefs, regional governors, Lord Mayors of KMC and Banjul, venerable religious leaders, managing directors and other senior government officials, paramount chief, representatives of the NGO community and civil society organizations, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and all other protocols respectfully observed. Let me use this occasion to welcome you all to the launching of this important document called the PAGE. You have all left your busy schedules so that this document is a national document and you attach a lot of importance in it, so we thank you for that. It is with great pleasure that we are assembled here to launch another milestone in the development agenda of this country, and that is the PAGE, the Program for Accelerated Growth and Employment, commonly known as PAGE, is the successor program to PRSP2, which is ending this year. That is, the implementation of PRSP2 will be ending this year. And the PAGE will shape the Gambia's development path from 2012 to 2015. Now, I would use the occasion to just tell you what this animal PAGE is all about. The PAGE comes in three components. The first is the policies and the strategies, and these policies reflect the national as well as the sectoral policies. The second is the priority action program, which identifies the individual priority investments in the form of human capital development, in agriculture, and infrastructure, just to name a few, and it has been fully costed. And then the third component is the monitoring and evaluation framework, because you cannot implement such an important program without having a yardstick to measure your progress or otherwise. The preparatory stage has been broadly participatory, with the task force being chaired by elsewhere MEPIT, later the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs as a result of the merger of the two institutions. And there were 13 thematic groups. And the consultations were highly broad-based with all stakeholders, ranging from HILEC, which was made up of key cabinet ministers and chaired by the Vice President, Her Excellency Dr. Aisatunjai Seidi. And also there were community consultations to determine the MDG as well as the PAGE needs. And then the civil society organizations were also consulted. The PAGE has three main objectives. One, we want to accelerate the rate of growth of the economy. Secondly, we want to make sure that we create employment in the process. And thirdly, also meet our international obligations in terms of the Millennium Development Goals. Now, accelerating growth. What we envisage in the PAGE is to make sure that investments are made in growth levers, such as the agricultural sector, with particular emphasis on inputs, irrigation, and land preparation. I will come back to inputs and irrigation. Experience has shown in some other countries, and even in the Gambia here, in the form of a project called JIP that was being implemented, that you can double or even triple production levels by just applying inputs, which implies quality seed nuts as well as fertilizer, etc., etc. So we will want to make sure that investments in this sector will take into consideration the issue of inputs. Irrigation, because, Your Excellency, if you look at the development part of this country, anytime there has been a drought, the latest being around 2002, and even this year we experienced some partial drought, production levels will drop, and as a result, growth is affected. I remember in 2002 when the drought happened, we had a negative growth, although slight, but that is the reality. Now the question is, do we want to subject a whole nation's development path through the vagaries of the weather? I think something could be done, and this is why the proposal that irrigation be given a priority during this period. The other areas of particular interest would be in infrastructure, transportation, for instance, the Farafenni Bridge, energy, among other investments, energy, ICT, with special reference to the implementation of the ACE project, which has been funded by the World Bank, and it will definitely transform the telecommunication landscape of this country, fisheries, etc., etc. Now, with this intention of accelerating growth, we had, the page had assumed 3 growth scenarios. One is called the baseline scenario, which is saying that given the historical pattern of growth from 2004 to 2011, without doing much effort, but just maintaining the status quo, we can still grow by 5.5%. And that is the baseline scenario. Then you have the immediate scenario, which is saying with the envisaged investment programs in the page, if resources are partially mobilized, at least you can accelerate growth to go between 7 and 8%. And then you have the optimistic scenario, which is saying if the resources that are envisaged in the page are all mobilized and invested with this timing, of course, bearing timing into consideration, we can accelerate growth to 11 and 11.5% over the planning period. Now, why is it important to accelerate growth? This is linked directly to poverty reduction, because there are some studies that have revealed that growing at a marginal rate would leave the fight against poverty will be an unfinished business. So you will want to accelerate growth to make sure that you have a dent on poverty. Then the other dimension, which is the third component or third objective, is to create, the second objective is to create employment. Your Excellency the President, we have just validated the integrated household survey, and the information that is coming from that survey is that 19%, we have an unemployment rate, national unemployment rate of about 19%. That is comparable, if you compare it with other countries, especially the US, whose current employment rate hovers around 9%, I think we are not doing very badly in that perspective. However, a big challenge remains, which is the issue of underemployment. And this is also linked to agriculture, because agriculture is employing 60 to 70% of the population, but because of the dependence on rain-fed, people are just engaged for a period of 3 to 4 months or 5 months maximum. We want to change that picture with irrigation so that you have a year-round activity of agriculture, but also resolve the issue of underemployment, which is a big challenge in this country. Your Excellency the President, we would also want to make sure that the page meets the MDG goals, which is an international obligation. I just give you a brief rundown of how Gambia is doing